Hello and welcome to India's World. As the Modi government completes its first 100 days, we are asking whether it has broken new ground on foreign policy. Narendra Modi began his tenure by reaching out to India's neighbours. However, his regional thrust has already run into problems with Pakistan. Under these circumstances, can SAARC really be the effective centerpiece of his neighbourhood strategy because you face a recalcitrant Pakistan? Modi seeks inspiration and investment from Japan and China. But would he be able to balance the relationship with the two countries, which are increasingly at loggerheads with each other? How does this government intend to carry forward the relationship with the US? And what are the new directions that this relationship can take? How does the Modi government view the developments in West Asia and their likely impact on India? To discuss these and related questions, we have with us a distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. He's a former foreign secretary, one of our most distinguished diplomats, and now a very well-known commentator on foreign policy affairs. We have Ambassador Rajiv Sikri, another distinguished diplomat. He retired as secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs and has written a seminal book on Indian foreign policy called Challenges and Strategy, Rethinking India's Foreign Policy. And we have Dr. C. Rajamohan, distinguished fellow at Observer Research Foundation, a think tank in Delhi. He's author of many books on India's foreign policy and is a distinguished journalist and a major public voice in India on strategic affairs and foreign policy. I welcome all of you to this discussion. Ambassador Sibal, let me begin with you. Do you find that the Modi government has been able to articulate a coherent and clear vision for India's foreign policy?
Well, you know, if by that you mean that he has a different vision and it is breaking new ground, and that all of us should now feel persuaded that at last India knows what it wants in terms of its foreign relations. I don't think that that is the case. I don't think there has been any radical break with India's foreign policy in general, including that of UPA 1 and UPA 2. In fact, the outreach to China was very much there in the UPA 1, UPA 2 governments. The outreach to Pakistan, which of course had run into troubled waters, was also there. Building a better relationship, strategic partnership with the United States and deepening was also there before, and he's continuing all that. So I don't see any radical change. I think the only difference is that he's not hobbled by coalition politics. He would be able to take his vision forward and implement decisions better than the previous government was able to do. And that might ultimately make a big difference in terms of how we conduct our foreign policy, because there will be a firm hand at the steering wheel, if you like.
Okay. Ambassador Rajiv Sikri, do you agree with what Ambassador Sibal is saying, or do you think there's been a shift? And if there is a shift, what is that shift? What distinguishes this government's foreign policy from that of the previous ones?
Well, I think that there is always a certain element of continuity in foreign policy because national interests do not change. Yeah. But I certainly do detect a change in style and emphasis. The style is more direct. Yeah. He knows what he wants. The emphasis is definitely more on the neighborhood and on Asia. Now, look at his travels to Nepal and Bhutan. His invitation to the SAARC heads of government or state. In the next month, in September, he's already in Japan. We'll have the Prime Minister of Australia coming in, the President of China, he's going to go to USA. The Foreign Minister has been to Myanmar, to Singapore, to Vietnam. The President is going to Vietnam.
So you're saying the flurry of visits is more than it was in the UPS time, and therefore the policy is different?
Well, I think one of the reasons why there is a flurry of visits is because the new government, people want to engage with them. But if you look at his emphasis, he hasn't traveled to Europe on any bilateral visit. The focus is more on Asia. And this, I think, is welcome. So, yes, I do see a change in emphasis. Also, he's not afraid to take on the big players, like on the WTO. There was a position that India took, and we explained why we had taken such a position.
But any government would have taken that position?
No, the previous government had agreed to what this government has rejected.
Okay. If we leave the generalities aside, let's talk about his focus on Asia and his special emphasis on China. Now, Modi visited China as Gujarat Chief Minister 3 or 4 times. And like all of us, probably got impressed by the developments you see in China, when you go there. But does that mean that, this government really appreciates China's stance and role in the region? Or do you think they're just overwhelmed by Chinese development and want to take inspiration from it?
No, I think there's more complexity to the policy. In fact, one of the Japanese journalists asked him this question because they quoted a phrase he had used during the campaign. He said, look, China has the expansionist mindset. Yeah. So a question was put to him very directly saying, look, what do you think of China's expansionism? So he ducked completely. He said, look, I traveled to China. We want to engage them. It's a very important economy. We look forward to Xi Jinping's visit. And that within Asia, the three of us, that is India, Japan and China, should work together. So I think the tone, of course, is not in an election campaign. My sense is the China policy will be somewhat different from the previous government's policy. The previous government pretended to be friends, but would do nothing on substantive issues of cooperation and push problems under the carpet. My sense is this government would be open for business. That is, it's going to be far more open for letting the Chinese capital come in. They're negotiating on the so-called exclusive economic zones for them. Two, I think on military modernization, it's going to be far more active. Unlike the previous government, this government is more open for defense cooperation with the Japanese, with the Americans. So I think a balancing element will also be there. So I think this is very different from the paralyzed, afraid kind of approach that Manmohan Singh's second term showed towards China.
Do you agree with him on China, that the previous government was paralyzed on China and this government will do, they want to bring in investment. But Chinese investment, let me complete my question for a minute, please. Chinese investment comes either in projects or it comes for development of those resources which can be plowed back into its economy for its own growth. So assume this kind of investment comes to India. But what will be the fate of the Chinese companies as long as, the border incursions continue? They're back again near Daulat Beg Goldi. Those issues, they will impact Chinese companies, will they not?
Two things. One, insofar as the previous government is concerned, in fact, previous Prime Minister met the leaders of China more than any other world leaders, if you look at the statistics. So there was very intensive engagement at the highest level between our two countries. Some of the phrases that our previous Prime Minister used, that there is enough room in the world for both India and China to grow, and they need not be in conflict with each other. A phrase that the Chinese leadership picked up and started repeating time and again. So I think in terms of signaling, the previous government was very much in favor of strengthening relations with China. They had also this strategic economic dialogue with China. In fact, many of the things we have with the Americans, we had also established as terms of institutional mechanisms.
But quickly, what outstanding issues?
But insofar as Chinese investment and the prospects of that is concerned, I think it's going to be a long haul, because China, so far, its total investments abroad, so far only 80 billion, right? Mm-hmm. And most of it is in Africa and other countries. So I don't think that they are going to invest in India in such a large way. And I think the Chinese will also keep in mind that the atmosphere of India-China relations can get soured very easily if there's another incident in Ladakh or elsewhere, or if they make statements on the border. Therefore, would the Chinese companies risk investing in such large measure in India unless the overall political relationship has some kind of a steadiness, which I think cannot be there until the border problem is resolved.
Okay. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the Modi government's foreign policy. Ambassador Sikri, let's take the case of Japan, a country which the Prime Minister is currently visiting. The Japan-India economic relationship can be taken for given as long as the Indian policy regime is right, land acquisition policy is right, and the Japanese investors get the kind of facilities they want, and they don't have bureaucratic problems. But will this visit be seen as a successful visit if the India-Japan civil nuclear cooperation deal is not signed? And do you think Japan is dragging its feet on that?
I don't think that the nuclear deal is as crucial as the media seems to make it out to be. There are other things to do with Japan. We need technology from them, we need their investments. But above all, I think what we need is a good strategic understanding and an enhancement of the strategic partnership that has been steadily deepening over the last few years. So the last point is, in my view, the critical one, because once there is a good understanding, and once we can manage to interest the Japanese businessmen to do more trade with India, there's more people-to-people contact, then all aspects of the relationship will develop. The nuclear deal is going to be problematic because on the Japanese side, they have a far more rigid approach than our other partners have had. And I don't see how India can make that exception for Japan, which it has not been not done for the United States, which did the heavy lifting for the nuclear deal. So unless there's a change of attitude in Japan, I really don't see any early progress on the nuclear deal, but I don't think it's such a big deal.
All right. Raj, is India ready and is Japan willing for the kind of defense cooperation you hinted at? And would that defense cooperation, do you think, involve transfer of technology and production in India?
I think there are two kinds. I mean, I think one is the political exchanges, other is the operational level engagement, and then the third thing is the defense industrial collaboration. I think on the high level exchanges, I think the Japanese want to elevate the dialogue. Today, our secretaries meet together, the foreign and defense secretaries. There is a 2+2 dialogue. They want to elevate it to ministerial level, but I'm not sure Delhi is ready for that. And second, I think they also want to bring in the Americans into the room in a much more intensive way, elevate the trilateral dialogue from a official level to the. There again, I think India might have reservations. On the operational level, I think we've just begun to do joint bilateral exercises. So I think there's a lot of room there. The third, of course, on the defense industrial collaboration, I think they've just changed their policy. And in fact, but I think this US to this amphibian plane we want to buy is caught up in a bit of a problem. Both of us don't treat it as a defense deal because it's actually a civilian plane. It's not going to be armed. But I think in the long term, there is a lot of possibility. But then, I mean, their systems are probably, they're slower than us. That itself is an achievement. But there they are.
So there'll be a show of good intentions and nothing more than that.
I think a roadmap to the future. And essentially on the maritime side, I think their prospects are huge.
The Prime Minister is also going to visit the United States. Now, do you think, like a lot of people say, that this is, he shouldn't have accepted this visit so early in his tenure because there are outstanding problems in trade, in intellectual property rights. The US has been unable to sell nuclear reactors to India. They have problems with our civilian nuclear, nuclear liability law. So, in such a context, if he goes to Washington, meets Obama, at the end of it, what will he showcase as his achievement?
I don't think anything dramatic will happen during his visit. I think the most important thing that one would wish would happen is that a good chemistry is built between the two leaders.
But isn't good chemistry often an excuse for saying nothing happened, they got to know each other better?
You're right. Except that there's been bad blood because the Americans denied him a visa for so many years and treated him very shabbily. So if he gets a signal from President Obama that his eye is not off the Indian ball and that he still believes there is a defining partnership and there are some serious conversations between them on the path ahead, that can help in terms of at least setting the direction of relationships and overcoming the past misunderstandings.
Without actually achieving
concrete results, none of the issues which are on the table, but none, is going to be resolved either as a result of this visit or in any reasonable time frame, because there are some fundamental differences, and what the Americans want are certain changes in our laws, the kind of economic reforms that they're looking at. They may happen, and probably they should happen, but it'll take a long time. And the problem is that the Americans convert many of these issues, which are multilateral issues, into bilateral issues.
In trade,
and
that
that also spoils the atmosphere in our relations, because unnecessarily they apply pressure on us.
Okay. Let's talk about West Asia. You know West Asia like nobody else in this room. Do you detect any change in this government's policy towards West Asia, especially its attitude to the Arab world, to the Palestinian issue, the way they tried to prevent a debate on Israeli invasion of Gaza? Is there a shift from the previous government's policy, and is it good or is it bad for India?
I don't think this government has focused enough on West Asia. Their reaction on the Israel-Palestine was a bit knee-jerk. Probably because there is a much closer relationship with Israel that this government has than perhaps an earlier government may have had. But I think now this has been balanced out. They have been involved in crises, rescuing people who have been caught in the conflict and so forth. But I don't see so far any signs that they have taken any strategic view of the very, very important and far-reaching developments that are taking place there, be it in Syria, be it the Israel-Hamas conflict, be it Iraq, be it Saudi Arabia, Iran. There's so many things which are happening there, the impending change of government in Afghanistan. So I would like to hope that they will give more attention, the kind of attention that they are giving to East Asia and Southeast Asia, they certainly need to give to West Asia, because that's a far more troublesome region. It's an area of instability, turbulence, whereas the East is more of opportunities and growth.
Okay. Raj, why do you think this government is not focusing on West Asia? I mean, we get no signal of its attitude to the Islamic State, its spread, the kind of developments that are taking place in even Libya, where the government has been changed, the involvement of UAE, for example, in bombing Libya. Things are changing in a manner that people in this country don't seem to understand. So why have we taken our eyes off West Asia?
Look, I think the Middle East is changing, but I think for us it's still domestic politics, for both the parties. For one, it is, has been said, vote bank politics. For the other, it is the opposite of that, which is we don't do that vote bank politics, but we might do some other vote bank politics. So it's really the Middle East. Our awareness is abysmally low, but given its impact on domestic politics, we treat it as purely as a domestic argument. It has nothing to do with the realities in the Middle East, because none of our political debate reflected, the nature of the changing Middle East, that actually Egypt, Israel and Saudi Arabia were on the same side in Gaza. So, but it doesn't matter. It is just about arguing between ourselves what we ought think Middle East is, but which it is not. Second, take the previous government. It did not pay much attention either. Mr. Manmohan Singh traveled just 4 times to the Middle East. In a 10-year tenure, in a relationship, forget the rest of the Middle East, just the Gulf is $250 billion worth. He just goes 4 times. Two of them are non-aligned summits, one in Iran, one in Egypt. And you do one trip to Saudi Arabia, and around it you visit 2 countries. I mean, for any country which has the stakes of the relationship that we have, that was allegedly a secular regime, which didn't do anything. Now this one, I don't see any interest at this point. Okay. I mean, it is still a tragedy that, they are all 2 hours away, 3 hours away, the Gulf. One hopes that this government, given the purely economic interest, that we need to engage them a lot more.
Okay. I'll come to you on this in a bit, but we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again shortly. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing the Modi government's foreign policy and trying to see whether there's been a change or whether this is continuity from the previous government's policy. Ambassador Sibal, you were ambassador in Turkey and Egypt, and you wanted to say something on West Asia.
No, I agree that we should reach out to the Islamic countries. Apart from the fact that we have a vital interest in the Gulf, which we all know, it's important in terms of Modi's political profile, because he has some baggage associated with him with regard to his views towards the Muslims and this and that. And if he can achieve a breakthrough with these countries, that will be very helpful in terms of Indian foreign policy objectives in this area, and would also help him in terms of domestic politics, if you like.
All right. Ambassador Sikri, Modi began his prime minister tenure by inviting the SAARC leaders, including Pakistan's Nawaz Sharif. Jalil Abbas Jilani, their ambassador in US, said back-channel diplomacy has already begun and the 2 countries are talking. And then happened the ceasefire violations, the Hurriyat interaction with the Pakistan High Commissioner, and on August 18th we saw a major change when Foreign Secretary level talks were called off. Now, India's relationship with Pakistan have gone up and down, but this government, why did it not anticipate all this? And did it assume that merely good intentions were enough to engage Pakistan?
I don't think there's any illusion on the part of the government. The outreach in May was part of an outreach to all countries. Pakistan could not have been excluded. That's how Nawaz Sharif was invited. It's a different matter that our public and media seem to think that this was a Nawaz
But
Sharif specific.
starting back channel diplomacy?
No. I think this is all. I don't think there's any back channel diplomacy.
Okay.
There's only one thing I want to say, that we should get away from using SARC as an instrument for our policy with our neighbors, because SARC will never take off so long as our relations with Pakistan do not improve. There are other means of doing it, through BIMSTEC, through bilateral channels. So that's the other thing I just want to
Okay,
say.
let me come back to you for a minute, because you've served in Nepal. If you take the case of Nepal, everybody said the Prime Minister's visit was successful, great visit, he gave a speech in Parliament, Nepalese Parliament, went to Pashupatinath with the Rakshmalas and, gifted them sandalwood and so on and so forth. But on the real issue of the power transfer agreement and the power production agreement, but Nepalese backtracked at the last minute. The Indian Prime Minister is going there after more than a decade. And if a Prime Minister's visit is not sufficient to change the Nepalese mindset, then what is? And how was the visit successful?
Two things. One, I must say that I personally greatly admire the self-confidence of the Prime Minister of India to address the Nepalese Parliament extempore. There's a lot of risk in doing this, because there can be slip up in words, or the nuance here and there may not be the right one. And in this country as sensitive towards in its relationship as Nepal is towards India, this could have been exploited by the media and anti-Indian elements, but this was a masterful performance. But I agree with you that it was most disappointing that the Nepalese have been unable to overcome their inhibitions and their paranoia and their highly negative mindset on water resources cooperation with India, when they will be the biggest gainers from this cooperation. And they were raising, to my mind, totally irrelevant issues and imputing us totally uncalled for intentions in proposing the draft that
No different from what they've done in the past.
No different from what they have passed. I hope they're given 45 days, I think, to try and rework this. I hope if that happens, then I think we can revise our judgment. For the time being, I think we have reason to be disappointed.
Bangladesh, External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj went there with nothing except expressing goodwill towards the people of Bangladesh. I think the only positive thing was she said that our relationship is not with any particular party, it's with the people of Bangladesh. But on Teesta, she had nothing to offer. On land boundary agreement, she had nothing to offer except good intentions. So with Bangladesh also, there's hardly any achievement. So what have we gained there?
I think they're just making promises at this point. Look, we're trying to build consensus, we're going to do something. Because till you see them actually make an effort to pass the land boundary agreement in Parliament, you could keep saying this, that look, are they serious? Now, my sense is, just as the previous government wrecked the historic moment with Bangladesh by playing domestic politics with it, my fear is the BJP might do the same, because they say, look, Assam, we have a constituency, we've just made gains in Assam, so therefore even 500 acres is a big issue, let's not do it. Same thing in Bengal, where they're growing again.
6.8% vote in 2009 to now 16 point something.
So I think if this is what's going to be their attitude, and a party of so-called party of national security is going to reduce one of the most important relationships, especially when you have a bad relationship with Pakistan and Bangladesh. Pakistan is a problem, Bangladesh is an opportunity. But my sense is, right now, they've not given any hint that they take a strategic view of Bangladesh.
Okay. Sri Lanka, do you think this government will also be hobbled by the sentiment in Tamil Nadu about Tamils of Sri Lanka and by the recalcitrance of President Mahinda Rajapaksa to devolve powers to the provinces?
I think that they will try and focus on one or two issues which are very urgent. That is the fishermen's issue. That is very important because it affects people. Otherwise, I think that they will continue to push Rajapaksa. My own understanding is that the fact that Mr. Rajapaksa was invited despite the open opposition of Jayalalitha has had an impact on Sri Lankan thinking. And they see in Modi a person who can stand up to the Tamil parties for the sake of the larger national interests. So I think there is some pressure on the Sri Lankans to be a little more reasonable.
But they will still not devolve power.
I doubt that they will do it in the manner that they had agreed in 1987.
All right. We are running out of power. So last question to you. So in the neighborhood, although we said neighborhood was going to be the thrust of Modi's policy, we've discussed most of the countries except Maldives. There's nothing much happening. We've discussed the problems with Japan, with China, with the US. So So what is the thrust? What is the focus of this government's foreign policy? Or you think we should give them more time?
See, a country like India has to have a multi-focus in foreign policy. We are not a one-issue country. A small country can be a one issue. If they have only bananas to sell, then they can only think about bananas. But we are such a big country, and we have such a difficult neighborhood. We are destined to be a regional and a global player. Therefore, we must act in various regions, at various levels, with various countries. And that doesn't mean that we don't have focus. It is that we have to pay attention to whole set of relationships, beginning with our neighborhood and extending towards the east and up to China, and in the west up to the United States of America. So I think the government knows what India's interests are, what its challenges are. Our problem has always been how to protect our interests and how to advance them, where we have failed because we don't have a coherent action plan to achieve our objectives, because we are hobbled by so many things, including our domestic problems, where we get bogged down because there are so many serious problems we have to contend with. And at the end of the day, and I'll finish here, unless you are strong internally, you cannot be strong externally.
All right. So let's hope a coherent plan is put into place by this government. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching.